You're on the air. Don't say anything crazy. Hello everybody, a very good day to all our listeners, and I am sat here with Brother Bear, Andre, and our guest, Jennifer Herring, who is a student of everything, and today we'll be bringing some very interesting insights and ideas on cult behaviors in North America and how this intersects with the world of urban planning.
Hey!
Welcome to the podcast, Jen.
Hey!
Jen, welcome to Brobears Talk.
How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm doing well. I had a long bike ride up a big hill in the foothills of Calgary, and now I'm ready to talk. And I'm interested that you called me a student of everything, because I know that you have a format of which you bring experts onto this podcast, and I am getting a master's in urban planning, and I do have a lot of experience just learning on my own about other various topics, but I do come at a lot of these topics as if I am a novice, because it's just one of those things you can never get good at. You always learn. There's always more to learn, and to be an expert is to be done.
Yeah, exactly. there's always more and more to learn, and Andre and I, this sort of hits home, this topic for us, because as geographers, we have a specific interest in urban planning and how architecture affects human behaviors and things like that. And I think it's going to be incredibly interesting to see how this intertwines with the world of cults and fringe religious movements and pyramid schemes and all those kinds of things. So it's going to be a very exciting couple of hours.
Fantastic.
I'm very interested how we're going to twine those two tangents together.
Yeah.
Planning and cults.
Yeah.
Well, we certainly have some experience of planning. It was light touch in geography, but it was always fascinating to me, and I imagine with the advent of big data, it's becoming sort of ever more evidence and analytics based. But yeah, Jen, I'll let you talk about how we get from cults to planning.
Yeah, so at the very... I feel like I should tell the story of how this all came to be, how I made this connection, because I don't think it'll make sense if I give you the short version.
Go the full 9 yards, Jen.
Yes.
I want to hear it from start to finish.
Fantastic. All right. So I have a very friendly face.
Very trusting face.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's very important in this. I think I have a resting, smiling face. I have been told this, which is...
Very true.
Oh, thank you. And...
That seemed to be the case over Skype earlier.
I'm sure Andre, all the way over in London, picked up that resting smile. Yeah.
Yes. The radiance came over the Wi-Fi.
Oh, wow. I have a boyfriend, Andre. Wow.
Back off.
I'm just kidding. But
I do apologise. Very British apology.
Very sorry.
Very sorry.
But yes, I have... I think I don't project that... In public, I don't project that you cannot approach me. And so I am very into cycling. I would bike around all parts of the city, and I would stop and just enjoy the view. And on more than one occasion, more than like 10 occasions, let's be honest, people would come up to me, unsolicited, sit down, and tell me their life story. And this still happens. Like, people tell me everything. I don't know what it is about me, but I know a lot of secrets.
That's
awesome.
Yeah.
Because we literally talked about this very topic in our last podcast about how North Americans, well, this is a massive sweeping assumption, that they seem to share a lot of what, on kind of wear their heart on their sleeve and say a lot of what Europeans would kind of hold off until maybe 10 years into a marriage and kind of say it all within the first hour.
Yeah, that was sort of the crux of our last podcast, Jen. So we were just discussing the general radical openness in North America, particularly in the US, but also very much in Canada.
Yeah.
And I think, if you've got one of those resting smile faces as you do, you'll be the recipient of that openness in pretty much any context.
Whether you like it or not.
Yeah. So, sometimes I will say it is a privilege to appear as someone that others can be comfortable around. That is definitely something I should not and do not take for granted. And also, sometimes I just want to eat my sandwich. So, I can't complain. But I really, in the beginning, fought a lot of these conversations and with people who would start to tell me their life story, their traumatic backgrounds, and because
Stop following me.
I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, and
I want to eat my lunch.
What are you doing?
But I mean, I want to also say that I think this is very specific to me. I've talked to many people about this, and it doesn't seem very common. So I don't know what it is about me, but
you're definitely an outlier.
I think I am.
There's openness in North America, and then there's what you've experienced, and I think what you've experienced is on a whole nother level.
Yeah.
Well, it's also this like radical openness in the absence of alcohol as well is quite atypical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Drinking here is a big thing. That is how people usually open up, and it's quite unhealthy to be doing so. I don't think it's particularly helpful for our mental health as a general culture.
To be dependent on that to be your true self.
Correct.
And Andre's also bringing that up because, yes, like alcohol consumption to be open is definitely a thing in all of the Western world, but in the UK and a lot of Europe, it's like everyone depends on that. And what we found with our times in the US and Canada is that people are able to be a lot more open without that kind of substance.
Yes.
Which has been quite refreshing for us in North America, I would say. But again, I think the people that have crossed your life, Jen, from these sort of cultish like backgrounds, have that, but something extra as well. It's like another level of openness.
Yeah.
You see, I can relate to it on some level, Jen, but in London for me, it's, people approach me, but it's just to ask for directions, and then that's about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So imagine
you're
living your best life around Pancras, St. Pancras. And,
Pancras.
And
Pancras.
Pancras.
The pancreatic station.
Yes. And, someone asks you for directions, and then when you think you're about to leave, they start telling you their deepest desires. Yeah.
That's it, like from a bit of a jump from 1 to 10, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's normal for me. And so for a long time, I did very much fight this happening. Because I didn't know, I'd had places to be.
Yeah.
And eventually I thought, well, if people are going to tell me, I may as well just start listening. Because if this is not very common with other people, then I have an opportunity to really learn about a lot of things, learn about people and about the whys of the world, and what people really want and what they desire and what they dream. And that's not something that I think that many people are either very open about or are very, get the privilege to hear about, unless you're a therapist, in which case you have a very select group of people too.
You're paid to do that, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's where the universe is trying to guide you. Maybe that's what you should be.
It's funny you mentioned that. I am considering a PhD or another master's in psychology. Yeah.
I mean, it's not a bad life, is it? Like, $200 an hour, sit in a comfy chair, listen to people's problems, and makes you realise how great your life is. It's not bad.
But also help people immensely.
Yeah,
that's a byproduct, but we won't talk about that, Because who needs to help people? Am I right, guys? Looking out for numero uno.
Show me the money.
Give me the shmoney.
Just throwing dollar bills.
This is what this is really about. Let's cut this
shit. This is the financial self-help program. But no, seriously, this began with people just coming forward to you, and so what kind of, so you to backtrack a bit, Jen, you said their dreams and their innermost desires. Now, what kind of desires would these be? Would these be like financial desires, or desires in terms of family, or travel, movement? Where did it go from there?
Yes.
Yes.
All of
yes,
it.
All of the above.
Yes. It would be about someone's home life and how they are trying to fix things with their spouse, or it would be I have a kid somewhere else and I'm trying to be a good parent to them and I'm not sure how, I'm here in the city trying to make it. Or it would be oh man, I'm so in debt. I was in the oil field and Like now I don't have any money because our economy crashed in 2008. Or any and all of the above. Like I feel disconnected in my community because of where I live, or I don't have a car, so I can't drive to the places I need to go, and now I'm stuck here and I have to take transit for 2 hours to get to my job, but I'm also trying to balance other needs and wants. It's vast. It is vast. And it could even be childhood stuff. People would tell me. They would tell me everything. And still do.
And Jen, what was like the frequency of these encounters?
Oh.
Yeah.
On the hour, every hour.
Really?
Yeah. If I spend enough time outside, it's gonna happen. Yeah.
So say sort of a typical week, it would maybe be, what, 2-3 times a week? You'd have these encounters with people?
Yes,
Wow.
and I would tell friends that this had happened, and friends would say, like, only you have these stories, I don't understand. Yeah.
That's quite a positive thing.
Well, people do talk about an aura and a vibe around people, right? We suppose you'll have some form of aura and metaphysical or whatever woo-woo you want to talk about, but there is definitely a feel you get from people, right, before you've even spoken to them. It's interesting. Anyway.
Yeah, so eventually I started to really listen to people, and I would be in a park for 2 or 3 hours at a time, and right around when I really accepted that this was just going to be a thing that people would do with me, and
drop-in therapy.
I mean, kind of, yeah, but also kind of not. It is quite open. Yeah, culturally, I think it's part of it.
I think that's definitely a positive indicator to take from that. That people entrusted you with this information. In the way that people do with, say, their hairdressers or maybe a physiotherapist or something like that. So it's quite. I think it's good that you were able to, as Andre said, give off that aura. To invite in. People's dreams and their inner woes and interest.
Yeah.
Well, just like approachability, like that's a great attribute to have. But I mean, in whatever avenue you choose in life, that's going to serve and be an invaluable skill.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe they just approached me because they like my bike, and I just haven't known it this whole time. It's not about me at all.
Yeah.
But so as soon as I started to really accept that this was going to happen, people would tell me all of their deepest, darkest fears and dreams and what have you. And then I noticed a pattern too, that a lot of them, not everybody, but a lot of them would ask me to go to some kind of event with them. And, stranger danger is what we're taught here.
Yeah.
Yeah, growing up. And I really resisted because I don't know these people. I met some people in a park. It could be dangerous, and just the general being a woman thing and going to places on your own with people that you don't know. It can, even in Canada, it still can be a safety issue.
Yeah. And
so I resisted for a long time. And then eventually I got asked so many times to attend these get-togethers that, kind of thought, well, fuck it,
Yeah. Why not?
Why not? Like, if people keep asking me.
You're being sent a message clearly here, Jen.
Yeah.
Enough people are asking you. Take the opportunity.
And Jen, how would they describe it? Like, are we just going to this event, or would they not go into much detail?
Well, they wouldn't go into much detail at all. They would say, thank you for listening. Like, I would like to invite you to this thing that I like to go to. I think you'd like it because I think you'd find it interesting. Like, you have the kind of demeanor that I think you'd be into this. And so they'd be very vague. And I learned later, intentionally so. However, intentional internally or externally it was. Like, I'm not certain exactly to the level at which they knew what they were doing. But
yeah.
So it would be vague.
And maybe when you would attempt to probe them a little bit, would they become a little bit defensive, or just shut down a little bit and kind of let your curiosity take you to the event?
They would be very vague. It's almost like they'd almost say a script of things that they were taught previously.
Would it sound scripted, or would it sound as if, would it sound like a well-rehearsed invitation, or would it be more natural than that?
an odd combination of both, in which they would say, you know, this thing has been really helping me, and also, have you heard of this thing? This has been great. It's given me financial stability. And I wouldn't really listen to that portion because it sounds a little too good to be true, but I'd be interested as to why people would keep inviting me to these events, and I'd figure, you know, like, if anything, this is an opportunity to further this quest of finding out why people do things and who these people are and why I keep getting approached.
Just basically burrowing deeper into the meaning behind why this stuff is happening.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. And frankly, at the time, I was taking a break from my university, my undergrad, and so I had nothing better to do.
Yeah. So it was the perfect time.
Yeah.
Start exploring some of those curiosities, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I remember going to the first one that I had ever gone to. I had been invited to this event by a coworker of mine. And this coworker, her and I, we really connected as friends, and she invited me to this thing, and I thought, well, you know, if I'm going to go to one of these very similar sounding pitched meetings, then I should probably go with someone that I know.
Social proofing, right?
Yeah.
Go with someone that can vouch
100%.
for it, or you know, give you some kind of protection in this new environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So I ended up biking all the way from this northern community to a very, very, very far northwest community in Calgary. It was something like, I think it was like an hour ride, something wild like that. Yeah. And we went together, but it was someone's house, this French woman's house.
Okay. And
so it was all very weird, because suddenly I'm going into someone's house. I'd never been there before. Yeah. And frankly, I didn't really know where I was. I look back, and this could have been very dangerous. But...
Yeah. Well, you're going into someone's home.
Yeah.
Their personal habitat with no... So this particular person, you'd had not really much information on what you were getting yourself into.
Not at all.
It was just a get-together or an event? Was it addressed?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. With under the guise of receiving mentorship. I remember that being a very specific sell.
Mentorship.
What mentorship actually means.
Was it financial or personal, or was it just mentorship?
Just mentorship.
Interesting.
Yes. And what does it mean to be a mentor? You know, there are different kinds of mentors that you can find here that are, you know, they're very solidified, but they're typically for people under 18. And so I was very interested in this at the time. I think I was 20. Okay. And so I was just coming into my own at the time. So yeah. Even just on a personal level, I was intrigued to know what a mentor would be like. Yeah. And so I went to this woman's house, and everyone was dressed in suits.
Ooh. Interesting. And you presumably were not. You were dressed in...
Oh, no.
Your usual gear.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I guess for the listeners, you should know that I live in exercise gear.
Oh, yeah.
I live and breathe and sleep sometimes. Yeah. In my exercise gear. And so I go into this house. Everybody's dressed to the nines. And there's 3 rows of really uncomfortable looking folding chairs in the living room. They've completely cleared the living room. And there are a bunch of snacks everywhere in the house, and, you know, I can't say no to those. So at least, at the very bare minimum, I got fed.
That's at least a win there.
It is.
Coming to a cryptic meeting, at least you've got some party rings and Cheetos to munch on.
Yeah, but the odd thing was that I really looked into I paid attention as to what was going on, because the second this French woman came in, or, allowed us in, I knew something weird was happening. And it wasn't because she was French,
That's exactly why.
Let's be honest. That's the reason, Jen. Let's make this podcast about that.
I don't blame
you. Poor francophones in Canada are already hating my Alberta roots.
Yeah.
Sorry, Quebec.
I think Quebec's hating, if possible, Alberta a little bit more now.
Je suis désolé. Yeah, so I go into this room, and it's already weird because everybody is dressed similarly with their suits.
So it's like a uniform almost.
Almost.
Yeah.
And you know, it's a very odd happening when you go into a personal home, like a single family detached home, and everybody is dressed like they're going to the office.
Yeah. And this was in the evening, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's very odd.
And I really looked closer, and all the snacks were of the same brand. All of them. Not a single one was different.
Yeah.
They're all of the same brand. And I thought, well, this is already kind of weird, but like, I don't know, maybe somebody just had a surplus.
Yeah.
How right I was. And so we all sat down eventually. I was introduced to a bunch of people, and they all like greeted me as if they already knew me, which was a little, I mean, it's endearing.
Ugh, bit culty already.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, you don't know me. I don't know you and your snacks. And so we all sit down, and this couple, they go to the front of this room, and they're standing in front of all of the rows that we are in this living room, the rows of the chairs that we're all sitting in now. And they start giving a presentation about how we need to, like, how great it would be if we all had money to do the things that we wanted. And if we all just, like, embraced a specific way of marketing specific products, that we would be free financially. And how great would that be? And somewhere in this, everybody out of their bags, just like a system, or everyone just knew to pull out the same snacks out of all of their bags.
What?
Yeah.
So in unison,
at the same time,
they all pulled out, synchronized the same type of snack. And what was the snack? Do you remember?
They were crackers, and they looked delicious. And
were they delicious?
You know, I never got a chance to try them.
Did they taste of financial success, Jen?
They tasted like financial ruin, I would assume. Unknowing financial ruin. And so
tasted like passive income stream.
Tasting, no, maybe they were triangular, perhaps the shape of a
pyramid.
A pyramid.
Illuminati.
Illuminati pyramid scheme shaped.
Illuminati confirmed.
Confirmed. It's
Get
done.
out.
It's done. Confirmed.
And you know, that was already strange. And so at this point, I was for sure not in it for the mentorship. At this point, I thought, I'm in it for the story. For
the story, yeah.
Yeah.
For the anecdotes to follow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because this is just so wild that, like, there's no way, like, I can't leave now.
No. You can't back out at this point when the crackers are out.
No. And so the people at the front...
Jen, how are you not a vice journalist already?
You know, I've thought about it.
This is incredible.
So they...
Hard to watch it.
Thank you. You just put a little, like, body cam on me. Maybe I should. But they start giving this presentation, and they start telling us about how lucky we are to be there in this one moment, and how people all over the world are killing to be in this room right now, and how they have a Skype guest that's coming in. And they're going to Skype with him, and he's, like, world-renowned.
So, wait, how many people are in the room at this point?
Oh, I'd say, like, 15. It was getting really hot, too.
Okay. And how big's the room? It's like a normal Canadian living room?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not that big.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, like, it depends
Crammed
where you
in
live. There. I mean, it can really change depending on your income and your general idea of, like, what you think your life should look like. But
yeah.
But that's a later topic.
That's for another time.
But I just found it so odd how they were very certain that we should be there, and how, like, everyone seemed very adamant to agree with them that we all, like, are very lucky to be here. And even the positioning too, like, this couple that we were presenting, they almost positioned themselves in a position of power. Like, they built a little stage, and they stood on the stage, and
mini pyrotechnics and flashing lights, and
you know, it would have fit. And I remember one question that was asked, and the question that was asked by the one person in the couple was, so would you guys, if you guys had all the money in the world, like, would you choose to live, or when you went on vacation, would you choose to, like, camp, or would you choose to stay in the swankiest hotel? And so I raised my hand, and I said, I'd prefer to camp.
Happy camper right here. You're looking at her.
Bring all the bears, please.
Yeah.
And and he was so rattled that I had this opinion. Like, it was like there wasn't another option. Like, obviously you want the flashy.
You took him off script, and he was
yes,
pissed.
that's exactly what it was. But at this point, I knew it was happening in its own like weird scripted odd way. So I think at the time I also said that just to poke at it a little bit.
Because you kind of felt that they would be aghast.
Yeah.
That you didn't choose like the swanky Malibu pad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But by being the devil's advocate, I gained a lot of information about the ideologies of these people and like what they actually were trying to send as a message.
Yes. Yeah. Decoding them basically.
Yeah.
I mean, already they're trying to sort people in a very binary way, aren't they? Like, are you someone who enjoys, or in their eyes puts up with, roughing it in the wilderness with the birds and the bears and the cougars, you know, or are you someone that is actually striving for this sort of pristine millionaire's lifestyle?
Yeah. Are you roughing it, or are you actually a hard worker and worthy of this lifestyle?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yes.
Well, they're like trying to reinforce that group, aren't they? They're sort of saying, you know, are you successful? Yes or yes.
Yeah.
Do you want to stay in the swankiest hotel?
Yeah.
Yes or yes.
It's like, you know, that film Yes Man, and it's like, I'd say no to this particular activity. Like, no man, like trying to alienate him.
Yeah.
Like that, I can totally see that. They're already trying to put you in their box, and if you're not in there, they'll try and either cajole or coerce you into that.
Yes.
It's a very like crude medium to long term form of hypnosis, I suppose. It's kind of getting everyone on the same wavelength.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I had said before how all these chairs looked very uncomfortable. And they had kept telling us that they were very cognizant of the time that we have taken to be there that night, and how very, very lucky we are to be there, and how like they want to make sure that our lives are honored and our commitments are honored.
Yeah.
And we got there maybe 6 o'clock, and this whole thing kept going until about 11:30 at night.
That's a long time.
So what was covered exactly, Jen? And what was the crux of it? What were they after from you and the others in the room?
They wanted us to sign up for seminars. So pay thousands of dollars.
So these were paid. These were all paid opportunities.
Yeah. I mean, for them anyway.
Of course.
Yes, paid for them. They wanted to recruit more people to get involved in these seminars to learn how they can be part of something called the business.
Jeez.
The vagueness.
Yes.
They've been very original.
I've been here for 5 hours and I am none the wiser.
Why am I here? Oh, we're getting there.
That's
$2,000 more dollars, please.
exactly.
Right. I've had
Yes, Leo said that with a smile, but that's exactly what
I
happened.
should have done that.
So essentially, was it a sign on the line situation at the end of the night?
Yeah. Now that you have sat here for 5 hours in this uncomfortable chair without water, and you know, watching everyone eat the same snacks, and now, like, at least in my experience, like, I had no snacks, so although I got somewhat fed, it was not enough for, 5 hours of sitting in an uncomfortable chair in some random French woman's house in a place I've never been. Very late as well. I did not get to learn what the business was, but at this point, I'm invested. So
Yeah. Is it that just, are you invested because of the amount of time and energy you kind of already invested into it? Sitting there and listening to this.
Yeah, like I'm still in it for the story, and the story I knew for sure was not over. And so...
Yeah. Well, that's an art to almost talk about nothing for 4.5 hours and yet kind of have you there. That's amazing. I mean, that uses some pretty sophisticated persuasion, I'm sure.
Yes. So I go into... Eventually, I end up getting driven home by one of the people in the couple, because, like, it was dark. I think I worked the next morning at, like, 7, something crazy. So, I had to get home, and maybe it was, like, an hour bike ride to get back. And so I got driven home, and this woman, she said that she was the mentor to my coworker, and that she was considering me for mentorship.
Wow, okay.
And so I thought, well...
So they elevate you
Yes.
like that.
It's like you've been chosen. You're one of the chosen ones.
Yes.
Who has shown potential to be worthy of mentorship, basically.
To possibly be worthy, but I must prove myself to be worthy.
I see.
Yes.
So it's like, there needs to be a payoff. You need to prove yourself.
Yes.
So that it's worth it Because if
Yes.
it's easy, it's not worth it, right?
No,
Yeah.
no. They don't see you, like, they're looking at you as a monetary investment, essentially.
Yeah.
So,
It's such a predatory formula,
Yeah.
isn't it?
yes,
And it's quite potent.
That's the best way to describe it. Predatory, actually.
it is.
It
Yeah.
really is. It really is. They've got it down to a T. Like, it's not going to work on everyone, but it's going to work on most people.
Yeah. You know,
Yeah.
and if you just do the right things, I guarantee it's going to work on you. Yes.
Mm.
So, right before I left, this woman gave me a book. I still have it, actually. I was supposed to give it back, but I may have kept it. So,
Sell it on eBay and you've won. You've made an
People will pay
net
thousands for that book, Jen.
I really was lucky to be in the room that night.
Yeah.
So she gave me this book, and she said, read this before the next time that we meet. And I agreed to meet with her again because, of course, the story is not over. I need to learn more. Like, what is happening here?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I definitely went into my own little nook, and I read this book. And it's interesting that you mentioned how the way that they're approaching this is very binary, because what this book was based on is primarily Christianity.
Okay.
Christianity and economics.
Wow.
And it was a very short read, but it
Interesting.
was almost Christianity, economics, and psychology,
Mm.
but like very like almost affirmation based
Mm.
kind of psychological
Okay.
sphere.
So, sorry to interrupt, but you're kind of saying the book was adept at hooking people in through perhaps beliefs that they'd already become accustomed to through school, and also the allure of financial or economic gain.
I think that's a possibility. I think as well it was a very good clue as to what was going on. Is this a religious experience? Is this a business? What is this business? Is it a church?
Yeah, like what is
Yeah.
this? How
It's
do you
almost
categorize?
like the vagueness in and of itself is kind of the fuel to keep you coming back for more snippets,
Yeah.
right? It's almost like a good book. It keeps you flicking through the pages onto the next chapter, or leaves you on a cliffhanger. Right, what's next? And it leaves you on this cliffhanger enough, kind of to the point of where you've invested and you're kind of on the train, you're on the roller coaster before you know it.
And that's the case with a lot of fringe organizations and pyramid schemes. Is it's like, oh, you're so close to the secret. You just need to, you just need to invest a little more time or money. You're nearly there, and you're always nearly there, but you're never quite there. Mm-hmm. And there's so many world religions have achieved that in various ways as well.
Yep.
Yeah, there is no destination, but you're made to believe there is one.
Yes. Yes, or at least that the journey is something that you're going on together.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a spiritual journey, and I think the fact that the book had certain spiritual beliefs and economic content is interesting, because I've certainly found again, another sweeping generalization, but in North America, there's certainly, in my time here, I've found there's a definite marrying of spirituality and capitalist ethics. And maybe that's grounded in like the Calvinist beginnings of settlers, but definitely in places like the Deep South and in Texas, people have almost ruthless needs for economic gain, and that's often justified by sort of a religious overtone. So I can see that marrying of spirituality and financial success very prevalent.
Yeah. The commodification of community is what I think is happening with this.
But go on anyway about the book, and
Yes.
what were the next steps?
Well, it was at this exact moment that I realized that this could be a cult. And I needed
Really?
some ground rules.
Yeah. You set your own personal ground rules.
I
didn't
did.
You? Yeah.
I did,
Yeah.
yes.
It's interesting.
I did not and still do not have any interest in joining a cult, but I, at this point, decided that I would attend these meetings so that you don't have to.
You're a journalist.
Yeah,
natural
investigative
journalist, Jen.
journalism here. Yeah,
Seriously.
this is another career route if urban planning doesn't work out.
A student of all things,
A
I
student
guess.
of all things. Keep your doors open.
Yeah. And so the 3 rules that I made for myself were that I am not allowed to research anything about this organization, even if I learn what the business is. I am not allowed to sign anything, and I'm not allowed to pay for anything.
Okay.
But the second that I can't go any further without signing or paying for anything, that's when I get to research what it is.
Oh. So, okay, so if you... Okay, yeah. So step 2 or 3, if you can't progress without violating those 2 laws, you see step 1, basically.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
That's really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Because
I think those are solid rules.
Yeah.
It seems to have served you
Pillars.
well. But it just reminds me of what Damien mentioned in our last podcast around that guy he met outside Target, and he said, "How do you want to make a passive income of toilet paper?"
you know, that's
Yeah, I remember that.
yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, I wonder if it's the same thing. So,
But these are very good pillars, I think, for like from you know, an
They
interest in terms of going down the rabbit hole, but also from a self-preservation perspective, because in terms of like your own well-being and your own you know your own savings, these, in terms of your just pursuing your own curiosity, these cults can be very dangerous.
yes, yeah. If you do get lost in it, if you're not critical, if you don't think critically about what's actually happening, and take note of things like demographics and
Yeah.
like just general behaviors and
Yeah.
what people are saying in which way and how and when,
Yeah.
and how long they're keeping you. Do they actually like take into consideration your time, or are they just saying that to keep you there?
Yeah.
Which is a tactic of a cult, I later learned. And they make you as uncomfortable as possible and as dehydrated and hungry as possible and tired, so that you're more susceptible
Yeah.
to
Oh my
That's
god!
accepting their
so it's like-
beliefs.
That's what the crackers
Yeah.
were for.
Yeah.
They were there to make you.
That's
incredibly
sodium. That's
Probably.
sodium.
Oh my god. Yeah, but also just crackers. You know, Leo, like a classic Jacob's cracker in
Yeah.
the UK. It's the driest thing in the world. You can't eat 3 in 1 minute. I don't think anyone's ever done it in the history of
Yeah.
world records.
I can totally believe that. I mean, a Jacob's cracker and most crackers, you know, your mouth is dry as a Sahara after your second bite.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just sandy.
But it's definitely the self-preservation aspect is a big thing, because you've just reminded me of the Westboro Baptist Church and Louis Theroux's he made 2 documentaries on that, and one of the most avid believers was this man, former rock star, who actually went to the church as an investigative journalist, as someone who was skeptical of the religion, and he'd created this documentary to criticize the Westboro Baptist Church and sort of debunk them as a sort of hateful organization. And as his documentary went on, he got hooked into it, and then he suddenly moved to their compound in Kansas and built a life with them there. So I feel like some of these cults, it's easy to sort of judge them and poo-poo them, but they're incredibly adept and effective at hooking people in, even people who come in with a skeptical and negative lenses of them.
Yeah. I mean, in the end, they are fulfilling something that is missing within our society.
Very well said. Yeah.
And if you live in a society in which there are gaps, like everyone is susceptible, you know, anyone could join a cult.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to know. Like, why were these people coming to me and telling me about their deepest, darkest fears? And how does this connect to me attending these meetings? And what do these people feel? What have these people been through?
Yeah.
Why are they here? What are they trying to achieve? Who's actually in charge here?
Yeah. And
Do
when
they
does it
know?
all end?
Yeah.
Like, when do you feel elated? When do you feel happy? When are
Yes.
you a success? When has the cult actually done what it's prescribed and purported to do?
Yeah, it's akin to a good non-profit organization. Like, a non-profit organization should exist so that it no longer has to.
So,
In terms of alleviating.
Jen, continuing kind of on your exploration and story
Yes.
in this cult, where did you kind of come across a barrier or something that conflicted with the values you'd set out?
So, yes. So I did attend a couple coffee sessions with the woman in this couple. Not that all couples have to be, you know, heterosexual, but in this case they were. And the woman, she and I, we met for coffee, and we talked a lot about what it means to be mentored and like how important it is to be committed And it was still very vague. I kept asking, well, what am I committing to? Because I can't really give you any of my own commitment until you tell me what it is I, first of all, need to do to commit, and also what it is to which I am committing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just incredibly cryptic.
Yes.
Each step.
Yes.
It sound like very reasonable questions. From
Yes.
Yeah.
And instead of getting any answers, I was asked to listen to podcasts talking about how I can be a better self and rich. And I listened to them. And the thing that really got me was that in this whole podcast, it was almost like recordings of almost like a church in its own way. It wasn't particularly religious, but the format was extremely religious.
Like the
particularly
delivery.
Christian.
So delivered in almost like a
Yes.
sermon
Yeah.
format.
Yes.
Interesting.
People, I would say like akin to something more Baptist, where people like are like yelling and like saying like, yeah, like yes man, no man. Like,
Yeah, right,
very
right.
similar.
Okay.
Yeah. And, you know, I was very intrigued by that, and I'm not sure exactly... At the time, I wasn't sure what the point was to listening to these, but again, in my further research, just looking at cults in general, there's an effect, a psychological effect of which I don't remember its exact name, but the more that people agree, the more you hear people agreeing with something, and the louder they agree, the more likely you are to agree with them as well, even if it doesn't make any logical sense. And so in these recordings, people are yelling and screaming and like laughing and cheering. And so I wonder if partially this tactic was used to try to get me on board and really stop asking some questions, which...
It's almost like the snowball effect of like the herd mentality and how that how that pushes people into agreeing with things that any logical person would usually say no to.
Yeah.
Well, it harkens back to almost a survival tactic of us being hunter-gatherers. If you weren't with the tribe, you were against the tribe, and when you're against the tribe, you're out there on your own and you're going to die. So being part of the group was almost a survival mechanism, and that, to a large extent, is still very much ingrained in our psyche.
Yeah, we have to create attachments in some way. And so with this, I was very confused about what exactly the business was and what they were trying to message me about. And so eventually it got to the point where this woman trusted me enough and thought it was enough of an investment, which I still think I still feel a little bad about, because this entire time I was thinking, this is craziness. I'm not actually going to join this. And this woman was taking time out of her life to try to invest in what she thought would be a good idea for me.
And she assumed that you were really on board with it, or in the beginnings of being on board with it.
Yeah. Which, you know, like on a human scale, I do feel regretful about, and also I still don't want to join your cult, so it's both.
Yeah.
So
You're forgiven.
Yeah. Thank you, almighty Andre.
Wow, I feel like a cult leader.
So she tells
Jen,
me...
did you ever find yourself... No, go on, sorry.
She ended up telling me what the business was. The very last... I think I met with her 4 times.
Secret was revealed.
The secret was revealed. And she told me, she said...
Well, don't keep us hanging.
Yeah.
Ba-ba.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Or else you're part of the cult. Just tell us right now.
Yeah.
We're eager to find out.
Crackers, wasn't it?
This is all a big... I'm actually part of the cult still. And this is all a pitch meeting. Do you guys want to be mentored? Have you ever heard of...
We've been had again. Damn it. Here's all our savings.
Damien last week with the toilet paper, now crackers.
Yeah.
What next?
You'd be amazed. There's lotion and... Okay. So that's another divergence from this. But the cult's name was Worldwide Dream Builders, which is a pyramid scheme. It's a multi-level marketing scheme, but it does have religious undertones, and it is technically legal in Canada and also technically legal in the States. But it is a pyramid scheme. There's some really shady things that happen. It was very... It's a cult in the way, because of the way they operate. The tactics that they use to get you to agree with them and to sign up are exactly what cults use. to get you in there and stuck. And so this woman, she told me the name of the cult, and I was very intrigued. And at that point she said, if we want to go any further, you need to go to this seminar. It's in Spokane, Washington.
Yeah.
And it costs $3,000, and it's in a month. And if you want to go, we can foot the bill, but you'll owe us $3,000.
What?
But we'll drive you down.
So you would be indebted to them?
I would, yeah.
Okay. And presumably this would come with like legal signatures.
Yes.
So it wouldn't be a verbal agreement, it wouldn't be anything tacit. You would literally be signing up, and legally you would owe them money.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yes. And presumably
It's dangerous.
this is I do remember a snippet. I don't remember much of this, but I do have an inkling of a memory of her mentioning that it was part of a program to get more people to come. So in the end, it was something that is organized. It's organized to get people to come to be indebted to others.
Right.
So that they can get involved.
Yeah.
And it turns out that those podcasts that I was listening to were little excerpts of events like that.
Other events like the one in Spokane.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes. So it was at that point that I thought, all right, this story has ended.
Yeah. And then you went...
So that's very disciplined, Jen, because maybe a lesser person or someone with maybe less sort of self-mastery would have potentially could have broken at that point and said, well, why not? You know, kind of, I've come this far. I feel like it's worth going. So what I'm interested in is how you managed sort of to be disciplined enough, or did you ever find yourself, in fact, sort of leaning towards or even entertaining the idea of carrying on and breaking one of your principles?
You know, no, I have not broken my principles, and I think it's partially because I am aware of the consequences of doing so. I have this is only one of my cult stories. I have many. We could talk for hours about the things that I have seen, and even just secondhand things that I have heard from friends of mine who've had other experiences like this. And I know what can happen if you get involved in these, I call these ones business cults. I didn't just attend business cults, but primarily it was business cults. And you can end up ruining your finances, your credit score. You can lose all kinds of connections with people that you love because suddenly you're so in the hole financially that you have to like scrape by and ask people that you may have never seen or may haven't have seen in over 10 years. Yeah. And suddenly you're asking these people to buy your products.
God.
And even you are buying your own products.
Yeah, you commodified yourself, essentially.
Yes, yeah. So it is the commodification of community. By and large, whether it's religious or not.
Yeah. And
I think the tragedy is even the people who have come clean and sort of spoken about their personal accounts of being in cults and going quite deep into down the rabbit hole. They're often there's not that many of them because they are just embarrassed for being made fools of.
Yeah, and they've also lost all of their connections within this cult too. And perhaps they have divulged a lot of secrets, a lot of like very personal stories, and it can also be partially because of fear that they don't speak out. They don't want these personal stories coming up and even impacting them in their legitimate business lives.
Which is a big aspect of the Scientology initiation process of divulging, criminal history or certain personal histories that may be seen as on the wrong side of the tracks, to keep you in your place, really. So there's definitely a fear aspect, and I think there's also this sort of social purgatory state whereby you maybe eventually, if you don't perform or you don't deliver financially, you're ostracized from the cult that you joined, but you don't have a life to go back to because you've really created these fissures between yourself and your loved ones, your friends. You've left those people behind to join the cult, but now you can't sustain yourself within the cult. The cult's effectively used you.
I suppose then when you leave the cult, you're kind of in no man's land because you've alienated your family and previous friends. You've now alienated the cult, and that leaves you in kind of a horrible no man's land and broke. It's a pretty despair situation.
Yeah, yeah. And similarly, I believe that people get into these kinds of cults because they feel a sense of loneliness and a lack of community. And suddenly this community is almost forced upon them, and it's everything that they've ever wanted this whole time. And they...
Well, that's the problem. I think it almost attends to and meets every need they were kind of lacking or looking for. And it weirdly it comes at the perfect time. It's like, oh, this is exactly what I needed. But in the meantime, it's sad because it's exploiting often, I suppose, two kinds of people. One, people with high openness, and those who are genuinely vulnerable. Right?
And I think that's definitely a trend in the US and in North America. You know, again, coming back to our discussion on last week's podcast, the level of openness in North America is, I would say, starker than most other places in the Western world. But there's also that particular vulnerability in Canada, but even more so in the US when it comes to people's finances and, you know, healthcare bills coming through and tax payments. So those two traits basically make it open season for cults to pry into people's lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Jen, I'm really curious, you know, cults, at least the ones I'm familiar with and seen from a distance, it seems that they're typically characterized by a powerful or charismatic leader or figurehead that's often idolized. And was there such a figurehead in or even any of the cults you explored?
Always.
Really?
But it wasn't obvious. And I think, yes.
Was it kind of a Wizard of Oz kind of thing, where they're kind of behind the smoke screen?
Yes.
They're kind of idolized as a god.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Especially with the business cult sphere, like it was almost like a celebritization of the leader, where they would go into these events like the one in Spokane, and they would speak about how this has worked for them and how you can too do this. But they weren't preaching anything about religion. Though, like, under the table, it is religious.
Yeah.
But they would almost be seen as the pinnacle of success. Through their faith, through their great relationships, through their great, like, financial status. And that's something that everyone obviously is aspiring to be. And if you're not aspiring to be that, then you are a loser and you're going to struggle.
You're spiritually unwell.
Yes. Yeah, you're lost. Yes.
And were these messiahs ever revealed in the flesh, or were they just discussed?
They were discussed. Videos existed. I did extensive research on this particular cult, Worldwide Dream Builders, which, by the way, is a subsection of another cult called Amway.
And a friend of mine actually mentioned Amway to me the other day as one of the most well-known pyramid schemes in North America.
Yes.
Of the legal ones.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Amway rebranded a section of their business to Worldwide Dream Builders because they were getting bad press, and so they still needed to keep making money. And that's basically what happened. Yeah, so the thing that I did notice that I made a note of was every time that I went into a cult, the first thing I would do is take stock of who these people are. Like, what is their, like, gender presentation? Are they, like, what is their age group? Like, what is their, like,
just a general
their cultural
demographic
background? Yeah.
A breakdown of the demographics.
Yeah, because I think that tells a lot about who is looking for what specifically and what holes are trying to be filled by this cult. And so the thing that I found oftentimes is that these cults were often held in suburban areas, fringe suburban areas, almost never downtown, unless you do count there are other cults that have, like, halls, which that's a whole other can of worms. But these particular business cults, they would meet in single family detached homes in sprawling communities with poor walking connection, poor just the general social incohesion in terms of having that interaction between people, between your neighbors.
But these areas, you're saying they were generally areas of affluence? suburban affluence?
You know,
Not social affluence, but financial affluence, perhaps?
it would really vary. Some were socially affluent, or not socially, some were financially affluent, but the majority of what it looks to be financially affluent is not necessarily the truth. A lot of our single detached homes, at least in North America, and I can speak specifically of Calgary, is that they may look nice, but they are so far away from anything that matters that you will pay less money for something that looks nice.
Right. Like that cookie cutter aesthetic.
Yeah.
But it's far from any amenities or place of social inclusion.
Yeah, and they might have community associations, most of them do. Or they have attached community associations, like almost conglomerated with a couple other surrounding communities.
Yeah.
But typically even the street patterns of it don't encourage walking. They don't encourage a lot of kids to be able to walk around. They're built primarily for cars, for convenience of driving.
Yeah.
And so if you are getting into your vehicle from your house that looks the same as everyone else's, and you drive maybe 20 kilometers to get to your job, which is how it is in a lot of North American cities. You drive to downtown or surrounding areas to work.
Yeah.
And then you work at your job.
Yeah.
And you're not expected to socialize in the way that maybe is most necessary for social cohesion and social just gratification generally for your mental health. Then you drive home.
Yeah.
And when have you talked to a person about what your hopes and dreams are? When have you actually talked to a human being about what matters?
Yeah. Yeah. That's very interesting.
I think this tragic lack of community cohesion and cohabitation, like it's just ripe sowing grounds for these kind of cults, right? Because they almost supersede that natural human interaction that should have been there all along.
Yes, 100%. It creates a community within someone's home that might be in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's right.
But also through the hope that you'll financially be better off, and you won't have to possibly, this is speculation now, possibly that you would not have to struggle as much to pay the mortgage of the house in the place where you live because you can't afford to live closer to your job, thus making you more socially isolated.
Right. So basically it's an incentive system. You've got your social incentive of having some kind of community to congregate with in somewhere that's familiar, a familiar neighborhood or home style. And then you have that financial incentive. The gap is being filled, to pay off this credit card debt or that mortgage or something like that.
Yes. And when I looked at many of these, most of the multi-level marketing schemes, the business cults, a lot of the people who were interested in this were young couples who were trying to make it, who maybe just got a mortgage or are thinking about having a family, or people who already have children and they're trying to find ways to supplement this new expense because kids are very expensive, or stay-at-home moms. Stay-at-home moms are a huge component of this demographic, and I believe it's because they are, whatever they had to do, whatever kind of community they had before, because they were at bare minimum going to work and still interacting with people, that was completely gone when they had to stay at home because of the way that our communities are designed.
Yeah.
And so
it does seem to go back to that. The root cause is a lack of social interaction, and the cult kind of offers a convenient solution to that. And I wonder whether people probably unconsciously are using the cult for that very purpose, and the kind of the money aspect is secondary almost, or that's consciously the primary thing.
I think that when it comes to stay-at-home moms or single moms, I believe that it's so intertwined with gender and financial stability that they can't be separated. They are so intertwined. In order to be independent like they once were, I think that oftentimes the role of a stay-at-home mom doesn't necessarily allow that, and that's okay if that's something that you choose to do and that's something you want to do. And within this setting, I do know that I believe that this is the reason why so many single moms or stay-at-home moms join is because they need some sort of quick fix to get their kids through, and some sort of purpose that they don't have, that they haven't maybe even talked to adults, depending on how old the kids are. In so long. And if they are with a partner, maybe they don't feel like they can add as much to the relationship. They feel like they're almost like sucking from the relationship. They don't have that equality as well.
Because the financial disparity between the genders are so high.
Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. I think you've also got, you can never discount, the boredom aspect, sort of the Valium addicted stay-at-home mum. This is like a sort of a newer, more socially cohesive version of Valium.
Hashtag wine mom.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the wine moms, exactly.
Yeah,
so it's...
Mommy needs a little bit of Pinot to get through the day.
Yeah, exactly at around noon or 1 o'clock. So I definitely feel like you've got your boredom, and also the allure of financial success carries with it, then I'll attract more people around me, then that will perhaps lead to more exciting experiences and groupings to new peoples that I can meet. So I suppose there's a whole ring of incentives that would come with joining a business cult.
And maybe I'm a stay-at-home mom, and maybe I can have it all. Maybe I don't have to live this way. Maybe I could be different from the other stay-at-home mums that have just turned to, say, wine or Valium or daytime TV. Yes.
And maybe I can actually be involved in something bigger than me.
Yes. Which, again, if you want to be a stay-at-home mom, you are doing the hardest damn job that has ever been created. If you're a stay-at-home parent, that's a hard-ass job.
Oh, yeah.
So not to, poo-poo all over people who stay at home with their kids. That's incredible.
Yeah.
And also within these certain social barriers that we have created, particularly with our infrastructure, this is what happens. The truth is that there isn't enough social interaction within our communities, and this social incohesion allows for things like cults, and also, depending on the area, it can also allow for higher crime. If you don't know your neighbors, there's a chance that people could get away with certain things.
Oh, certainly.
More often.
The transient neighborhoods are often the ones where crime gets most unnoticed. And most, unreported crimes, increases in crimes. But yeah, definitely not to pass any judgment on stay-at-home mums. I mean, it's more, not that the job of a stay-at-home mum or stay-at-home dad is any lesser than a normal 9-to-5. It's more the social exclusion that may come with that that could trigger, the allure of joining a business cult.
Yeah. And that wasn't always the case in terms of demographics. A lot of the demographics in business cults were skewing female or couples, particularly Christian couples. But in other cultish meetings that I have been to, and other cultish meetings that I've been to, I've noticed that there have been quite a variation in demographic too. And I think, again, that doesn't necessarily speak to gender, but I think it very much speaks to just the general lack of social cohesion that we have overall in North American cities. Because of the way that we've developed our cities, because of the way we've imagined that we should come together.
And particularly in places like Calgary, because for the benefit of listeners who haven't been to Calgary or Western Canada, there are a lot of parallels to be drawn with cities like Phoenix, Dallas, Las Vegas, outside of the Strip that would be, but these sort of big sprawling areas where there's very little interaction with other humans. And Andre and I, in terms of when we were studying geography at university, definitely looked into some of these imagined outcomes, particularly through the Frank Lloyd Wright School of architecture. Sort of massive open spaces where car is king, very low density, low rise, not very walkable at all. There's an incredible benefits to that, if you are lucky enough to have your own space, and a strong network with a lot of rapport. But for newcomers or for people perhaps with social issues, these are very unfriendly spaces. in terms of imagining, freedom or realizing your dreams.
Yeah, which is a very interesting way to put that, because specifically I think in Canada too, less so than America, but in Canada there is a focus on freedom, particularly in Alberta. Alberta is the Texas of Canada.
Well, I've always seen, and some people would find this controversial, but I've found Alberta more American than some American states I've been to. Like I find it more in terms of like its tax system, the cars people drive, the way people act. I find it more American than parts of New England.
That hurts.
Sorry, Jen, if that offends you. I know Canadians never like being compared to Americans, but...
No, I sincerely think that part of the Canadian identity is just not being American.
Yeah, it's a bit like Scotland and England have a similar relationship. Like, a lot of Scottish people don't like to be called British, or to call them English accidentally is sacrilegious.
Jen, I just wanted to ask, because I suppose the cults you've been involved in, at least the sense I'm getting here, is that they were quite covert and secrecy was very much part of the marketing tactic. But there's also in tandem, and I suppose in the last sort of 5-10 years, there's been a real rise in sort of the pseudo guru or fake guru phenomenon, right? So that's overt marketing on the platforms the likes of YouTube, right, where it's all about like self-improvement, financial freedom, passive income, all that rubbish, that bandwagon. And you've seen a massive uptick in that kind of in the overt platforms and talking about it very openly. And a lot of those have been characterized by cults. And now kind of have you seen the overt marketing on these platforms kind of coincide with a rise in covert secret, these kind of cults where you're kind of interacting in person and it's not so much done via software?
Well, I think that a big part of, I think a lot of it too has to do with social media and this idealization of what life should be like. Like if we're not talking about the infrastructure, we're just talking about marketing. It's about living your best life, and the best life usually involves buying products.
Yeah.
And only the products can make you live your best life. And if you just bought this yoga mat to do more yoga, and like signed up for these classes that like this particular person, this almost idol, is running, then you'll be happy.
Yes.
Then you'll be happy.
Yeah, but there's almost like personalities, a bit almost exactly like you've got on a cult, the cults you've described, but almost on a maybe not even a bigger scale, because I've not really looked into some of the cults you mentioned, but almost built around a personality, around a charismatic or powerful personality like Dan Locke. I don't know if you've heard of him on YouTube, like Dan Pena.
Yeah, Dan Pena. Yeah,
a great hero of ours. But London Real, like all of these pseudo gurus who are either sort of marketing ways of getting rich quick, either via e-commerce or drop shipping, that craze. And there's also, interestingly, in parallel, a rising tendency of some mini channels like CoffeeZilla, which literally debunk these guys and sort of dissect their marketing tactics and look at the ways they're manipulating their audiences into getting into these sort of, I suppose, pseudo courses that actually bring you no value at the end of the day. It's all about just kind of getting you hooked on this drip feed of information. And it's kind of, if you get this seminar, then you're on to this seminar and you're like level 8 now, and it's just level 10, you're going to get the secret, whatever it is.
You'll be diamond level.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's a
platinum
I
client.
think was it the Dan Locke one you mentioned, Andre, where like there was almost like a circle you were getting to. It was like, and then you'd had to pay more in money and time to reach an inner circle, and there was an inner circle.
Yeah.
And then
inner circle.
There
Very
were like
similar.
these layers,
And
these onion like layers of the cult, and then when you
Right.
got to the core of it, like the final secret revealed was just something really vague, like work hard, be good at sales. Like it was just something so.
It was exactly
Buy my
that.
snacks.
It was exactly
Yeah,
that.
buy my crackers.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
And it was quite tragic. Like there were people who were, maxing out 3 credit cards, and they were still like crying their eyes out because they couldn't get the black band for the inner circle. They're like, I can't do it. This is going to solve all my problems.
Yeah, there were people blowing like
And they
20
genuinely
grand.
believe that.
Yeah.
So yeah, as I was saying, I think in tandem with all of these pseudo gurus on platforms like YouTube coming to the fore and having a lot of success, there's also this almost the internet's immune system, in that you have channels popping up that are debunking these fake gurus and kind of showing up these gurus for who they really are. And one of these channels, we'll put it in the description actually, Leo, it's called CoffeeZilla, and he's quite a articulate guy, goes into and speaks to people who have gone deep into these cults and not gone deep kind of on the surface level, and but spent copious amounts of money. I mean, this one guy, I think, who got into the Dan Lok cult, spent something like $40,000, and which was essentially his life savings, and that was that was over and above his life savings, and he actually went deep into credit card debt. And there were stupid things like they were inviting him to the Grand Hyatt in New York and creating this illusion of plenty and just living a lifestyle, but ultimately the content, when it push came to shove, and the crux of what was being given as value, it was nothing beyond something you could get from a good self-help book. And so, yeah, it's really interesting to see these interviews, and it takes a lot of courage, I mean, for these people to come forward and speak forthrightly about their experiences, because for them it's a massive embarrassment, right? And because they shun their friends, their family to get into this cult, and now they're basically having to say the last 2-3 years of my life were a complete waste of time and money.
Yeah, I mean, I would actually have respect for someone who came forward and admitted that it was a mistake, because they're also doing a social service by telling people, don't get involved with this proposition, it is just a cult.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I think that's how he justified it to himself in the end, is like, if it stops one more person from making the mistakes I did, then it's worth it.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting because this intertwines with what Jenn was mentioning before about social exclusion as a result of, I suppose, individualistic or atomized urban planning, because a lot of us, in many aspects of our lives, take that and resort to spending more time on the internet. And you sort of have, if anyone's read the book Bowling Alone, and how that's all about the growth of technology, and the internet has made people more atomized from their friends and family. Humans are naturally communicative, warm individuals. We require some sense of social community. And I think this is interesting because this is also where social media steps in. I mean, in many ways, social media is a cult as well, on a broader scale with more efficacy. It's it is something that if you're not part of it, you are excluded from many activities and groups and linkages in your network. And I can say that from first-hand experience with social media. And it's also a tool to advertise these these pyramid schemes or these multi-level marketing organizations.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the side effects of all of this marketing, whether it is fake gurus or something that's genuinely interesting, one way or another, it has very little time to grab your attention, or a 5-second window when it comes to a YouTube ad or whatever that is on a feed on Facebook or Instagram. But essentially what it does is it's very gradually chipped away at our attention spans, to the point of where I can wholeheartedly say I do not have the attention span I had 10 years ago.
No.
Like just scrolling through a feed mindlessly, I think, is unfortunately an experience we can all relate to all too easily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the messages that you get there, it's almost automatic. Like, you just accept them as they are.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
And you feel awful after it as well. You don't feel like you actually gained anything or got any value out of it. It's just literally just time wasted.
It's very draining.
I just need to get one more Candy Crush. One more.
Just one more. Just one more. Yeah.
So true.
Then I'll finally reach the pinnacle. I'll be double diamond.
You'll be double diamond platinum member.
There's another level. But there's also another tactic it's been really interesting. Obviously, there's like the long form conversations that this guy CoffeeZilla on YouTube kind of has with these people who've been deep into the cult, spent a lot of money, wasted a lot of time. And then there's the other guys who kind of go down the humor route. And one guy kind of does this entrepreneur bingo, and essentially it's kind of ticking off one after another the typical marketing formula tactics used by these fake gurus. Kind of one of them is like the one time only offer. This is the one seminar you can get this. And whether it like the form of that conversation with the guru would be, or the fake guru, is the webinar or seminar or in physical or virtual, but it's always like the one time only offer. Promoting like a future event is another one. And funnily enough, another one that's typically used is the price ends in a 7. So because $999 is, or $999 is too much.
Yeah.
$9.95 is too cheap, but $9.97, damn, that's
Oh,
a deal.
okay, yeah. Yeah, that's like, I mean,
Yeah.
from like a sales background, they were always going on about the Goldilocks principle in pricing. You know, sort of the price or the digit that will trigger a positive response from the consumer.
Yeah.
And that's crazy. But you've also got sort of really basic like sales 101, fear and greed there, which are like usually the two motivations. You've got your fear of
One time.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Like this is your one time to seize this opportunity, or your life's going to be a failure.
Yeah. And then there's also bonus stacking right at the end, which is kind of like, that's the slam dunk, where you're kind of like, you're getting all of this, but then I'm going to include the Instagram masterclass, I'm going to include the copywriting formula, accelerate your year course, and the e-commerce supercharger method. Like typically, normally this would be 10,000. I'm going to give it you tonight, just tonight, for 800. And you're like, wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, the value you're getting there.
Yeah, it's called bonus stacking, and there's always like this bullshit backstory typically as well, where you kind of emotionally engaged. They came from hardship, mother died. It's all usually made up, and it's basically intended to pull on your heartstrings and look at the journey you could potentially go on as well. And I wonder, Jen, if you can relate to some of this, if not all of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it all sounds like a country song, so good old Berta. But yes, I would say that it is very much a narrative that they are selling you. It's not the numbers. It's not about anything concrete. It is a story which they want you to believe, and they want you to continue the story as well. That's what it is. But they prescribe meaning to numbers that I don't think they're inconsequential. And I don't think that people have as much financial literacy, or they're willing to believe this story so badly because they really need a way out, or they need some sort of savior to try to get through hard financial times, that they don't pay attention to what is actually being said and what is actually being told to them. I don't know if you've this is a bit of an aside, but I know I don't know if you've ever heard of this book called The Grapes of Math. No, it's a really, really neat book, and it's written by this guy who did a lot of marketing research for a couple companies, but he basically looks at how we as a society, or even as a species, even broadly, look at numbers and assign meaning to numbers. And
Interesting.
One of the most, I think, like the most interesting parts of this book was when when he talked about KFC's 11 herbs and spices, and how it's a story that you're telling. You're talking about 11 herbs and spices.
Yep.
How it's all kind of secret, but the reason why it feels like a secret is because he theorizes that there are 10 fingers on the human hand, or on both. That would be freaky. 20 fingers.
Yeah. 20 digits on both hands.
Yeah, so in all we have 10 fingers. And if you have a number 11, it's something past the human finger count. It seems almost mystical and unattainable.
Yeah.
And secret, and also maybe even godly. And so when you have 11 herbs and spices, with KFC, once they started to market that, it was like their sales just completely skyrocketed.
Yeah.
Because
really
it seemed like something to believe in.
Because 10 is such a familiar number as well in many other areas, and your divisible by 10 is very important when you're learning mathematics. So like 11 it does inspire like that sort of mystical curiosity.
Yeah.
Like, that's even better. It's almost, it's like turn it up to 11.
Yeah.
On the amplifier.
Exactly. Yes, it's one better than 10.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like, I've got 10, well, I've got 11.
Yeah.
It's just like...
Yeah.
Got the X factor.
Whatever you've got, that plus 1 is what I have.
Yeah, and it's also...
It's like kids. I'm whatever you say plus 1.
Infinity plus 1. Yeah.
I win.
It's still like, it's also a prime number too.
11.
11, yeah.
Ah, yes.
Which makes it possibly harder to conceive.
Yeah. It makes it almost more unique and, more sort of a standalone number, something that should be sought after.
Yeah. And so when it comes to, I did notice some numbers being thrown around within these business cult meetings of the various ones that I've been to. And I mean, like, I am just astoundingly poor at math. I will not say that is my strong suit, but I do know with a bit of critical thinking that the numbers did not align. They didn't make sense. It was almost, the numbers themselves were the story. They weren't telling us data. They were telling us a story using the numbers that I don't think they thought about this as deeply, but that has a societal association with meaning.
And when you say the numbers, how were these numbers placed? Like, where were these used, these numbers?
I mean, they're all they were written down on a board, or they were just spoken aloud and quickly moved on from.
Okay.
Because, again, it wasn't about the actual economics of how you would do well within this business cult. It was, well, you see, there is an increase.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You know?
So again, even the numbers themselves were incredibly vague.
Yes.
In your successes.
Yes.
You'd be like, well, we can't tell you exactly how much you'll improve, just that you will improve.
We've had a 50% increase on $1.
Right. Okay.
We could have a 50% increase on like $12,000. And you'd be making a lot more money, but it was all very vague. They had been throwing around percentages.
Again, it's like how you present the data.
Yes.
To tell a story.
Yeah.
Right, and that's where it becomes distortionary.
Yeah.
I think almost that vagueness serves as a smokescreen, and a bandwidth is therefore allowed for the person being indoctrinated's imagination, essentially, to run wild. And kind of their best tool is your imagination against yourself.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so like, what do you think you can achieve? Don't you want to be the best you that you can be?
Yeah.
Only you can decide.
They almost give you like the potential to imagine all the amazing potentials of following through with this course. And your own imagination does the work for them.
Yeah, it's sort of the human sense of wonder and pioneering spirit that's in everyone's minds, really. I think it's very empowering as well for a lot of people, because it's almost like they're not fully giving you the answers, and because they're not doing that, you feel like you're in the driver's seat. You are. It's not a cult. Like, you are the one who's achieving these things, and that illusion of being empowered is what keeps people basically ruining their lives and spending their money and time on these things.
Yes. Yeah, and even creating even more social incohesion than there was before, because suddenly I know that this happens with legitimate businesses versus illegitimate businesses, where the business cult participant will say, well, why don't you, insert person here, support my business and my dream and my future? This is the only way it can happen. Yeah. But in doing so, like, take a lot of money from the people that they love and almost emotionally, unintentionally, emotionally manipulate them into participating in their business cult. Yeah. While at the same time delegitimizing actual small businesses.
Yeah.
Because it becomes a line that becomes blurred between knowing what is actually true.
Yeah. And that comes at the expense of small enterprises that are actually providing goods and services that are good for society.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
I think when you come out the back, especially if you've gone very deep into a cult and spent your life savings on a cause or an idea, I suppose you come out very disoriented in terms of your compass and kind of wears up, works down. And you're, again, coming out of an experience like that, I suppose, vulnerable to almost fall into the same trap.
Yeah.
I know that the anecdote that I'm about to say is exactly that. Like, I have someone that I used to know that got out of an MLM a multi-level marketing scheme, aka business cult, and they didn't know what to do with their lives because they felt such meaning and belonging that in this business cult, but they couldn't continue it because, of course, it's not sustainable unless you're at the very top. And they were looking for that almost more so afterward, and they ended up getting involved in a legitimate cult. They're all legitimate cults, business cults, but like a really, really scary one.
Okay.
Actually.
A hardcore cult.
Very hardcore, yes. And that person I have not heard from in years. So it's...
Gosh.
Yeah.
That's scary. So I think we've almost spoken about... Well, there's arguably sort of three characteristics that define a cult. One we've already spoken about, which is guru as this almost entity or deity to be worshipped, and this figurehead that's often sort of in the clouds somewhere and not very clear. Two, another one is the sort of thought reform characteristics, so systematic indoctrination, sort of, and that's also characterized and in parallel with self-criticism and almost a ritual of confession. I was wondering, Jen, if you'd seen any of that, sort of the thought reform and self-criticism and then confession to the people in the group.
Jen's smiling as if to say, yes, I've seen that 1,000 times.
I've done it.
Been there, got the t-shirt.
So...
Got the mug as well.
Lost all my savings.
Well, this example, I'll keep it very quick, just so, I have many of these cult stories, but this one in particular was quite egregious. In my previous educational experience, I had a project that I wanted to bring to light, that I wanted to complete, and I wanted to get the backing of my student association. And so I went to them and looking for funding, essentially. And they said, oh, well, you should talk to this specific staff member at the university. They're doing a similar project. They might be able to point you in the right direction. Go talk to that person. And so I said, yes. Okay, great. So I went and talked to this staff person, and they invited me to a meeting. And I'm like, this isn't what I think it is. Just in denial. And the staff person told me to go to this hotel for this meeting, which, maybe this was a bit foreshadowing what would happen, but I had to bike through a graveyard to get there.
Gosh. It's already dark.
It was already dark. It was a dark Canadian February graveyard.
Chilly.
Very cold.
My favorite.
I think it was -30. And so we...
God.
And so I get there, and the staff member said she was going to meet me there, but she was running very late, and so I had to go in there on my own. And someone meets up with me, and they say, "Are you Jen?" And I say, "Yes, I'm Jen." And they ask me to give my phone number and address, and I knew better, so I didn't. And they led me into this room, and there were over 100 chairs in this basement in this hotel. Quite a prominent hotel here in Calgary, too. And every single person that was in there's maybe 50, 60 people.
Yeah.
Every single person in that entire room knew who I was.
What?
What?
And they were all welcoming you and
Yes.
shaking your hand and saying...
They're like, oh my gosh,
Jen.
you're Jen. We've heard so much about you. We've heard that
Oh my god.
this staff member...
It's like a horror film.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's like something from it's like a sort of a Being John Malkovich sort of weird situation there, like a Twilight Zone-esque.
Yes.
Like everyone knows who you are, and it's almost like you're in your own dream.
Yes.
You're meeting all these strangers and blurry faces, but they all know who you are.
Yes.
That's bizarre.
And they were talking about how much this staff member was, I had only known her a week, and she apparently had told them all that I'm a shining light, and that I am, a gift.
Yeah.
And, finally, she's so excited for me to come here, and so all these people were saying that, oh, yes, we're expecting big things from you, and...
Gosh.
But I had been invited to this get-together in the hopes that someone would, want to give me finances for this project of mine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I was there under the guise that I would get to meet some very rich people who had money to give me.
Yeah.
For this specific project.
But it turned out they wanted your money.
Yes. Yeah, so what ended up happening was that I sat down, and this someone came to the front and they started this meeting. At this time, every seat was full. And they introduced themselves, everybody introduced themselves, and then this woman said, yes, I want to just welcome Jenn here, and everyone turns around and is clapping and is like, ooh, yes,
Yeah.
Jenn.
Yeah.
Yes. It's an entire room of people clapped for me.
God.
And
Oh my God. Standing ovation.
Well done for being Jenn.
And you've only been there 1 minute.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then ensued the personal testimonials. People got up on stage. I think it was like 10 people. They got up on stage and started weeping in front of everybody about how much this has helped them and
Yeah.
how great whatever the heck this was
Yeah.
is. And
Again, was it incredibly cryptic about, what it was they were even
Yes.
talking about?
yes.
Okay.
And I was thinking, well, maybe I'll just sit through this weird meeting. Like, this is absolutely a cult, but, maybe they have money anyway.
Just like hanging on, hoping out for the money.
I love it. You're just like you get the light bulb moment. Yep, this is a cult, but I'm gonna sit it out.
I mean, this is a senior staff member at my university. So,
That's bizarre. Like the welcoming would have really, really not sat right with me. That would have been really alarming, because that's sort of, I suppose, coming back to the incentive thing, because we're talking about what your incentives are, and that's like the ego massage technique, isn't it? It's like, oh, you've only been here 5 minutes, but you're now so integral to our organization. Mm-hmm. You're so, you will be the poster child. You are a beacon, and we all love you.
You are special.
You're special, yeah.
Yeah.
You're unique, and you really can't go anywhere, or else this organization just won't be the same without you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and so after all these testimonials, I realized that this staff member had actually slipped in, and they were about to stop the testimonials. It's like, but the staff member raised her hand and said, "Yes, I can speak." And so I thought she was going to go up there and do the same thing, but she just starts going on about how great I am to everybody, but never once mentions the project that I was working on. Not even once. And so I sit through this thing. I think it started at 7, and I was there. I was in that room hoping that I would get introduced to someone, and like we'd all get up and chat. I was there until 10, just sitting.
Yeah.
And then after that, they asked, "Is anyone new here?" And I raised my hand, and 3 other people raised their hand, or maybe like 5. It doesn't matter, just a couple. And we all came into they took us out of that room, full of all the presumably they're all investors, but maybe not. And they they put us into a different room and thus began a therapy session.
What?
Yeah.
Like a group
Yeah.
therapy, okay.
Yes, and at the end of the session, it was revealed that only 2 people were actually new, and the other people were almost placed there to look like they're new.
What?
So that they could make sure that we bought some ticket to a seminar. That I think it was $1,300.
What?
Yeah.
So they were like almost mystery shoppers,
Yeah.
but they were just placed there.
How did you find out they were fake newbies?
Well, they started to set up the table at which I would buy things from them.
That was a giveaway.
Oh, right.
It's like,
You seem a bit too familiar with this.
Yeah.
conceal this very well. You're doing an inventory count of all of our goods. Like,
Yeah.
Aren't you supposed to be new?
Yeah. So, it does run on testimonial. It does run on emotion. It does run on narrative.
Mm.
And it runs on personal growth more than anything.
Yeah.
And well-being.
Yeah, and I think that incentive keeps people stuck on it, even if they perhaps did become successful in another way. A friend of mine always had the analogy of a raft, and he was a defected member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And this isn't to trash AA in any way, because I think AA is a program that's certainly helped a lot of people with alcohol and drug problems. But then what this friend of mine always said is that there was a very culty dimension to it. And the raft analogy was that, okay, so on one side of the river lies alcoholism, and then on the other side is freedom from that and sobriety essentially. And this is a parallel to be made with, okay, you're in financial and social ruin. On the other side of the river is financial and social success. You get on the raft, and presumably you're supposed to be getting from one side to the other and getting off the raft goes back, new people come on that to make their journey, their odyssey through that. But the issue is with cults like the one you described, and this is what my friend was always getting at with the AA, which is why he left, is that people never get off the raft. So it gets to the other side of the river, it's like you made it, you're sober, time to live your life and get on with your own life and all your new relationships. But you can't get off that raft because you're so fused with it, you're so intertwined, you've put either so much money into it or you've left behind other friends that weren't a part of it, which you now see as spiritually or financially unwell. So that raft suddenly becomes very crowded with thousands and millions of people that are too afraid to leave.
Right.
Yeah, you almost like formed bonds with the people on the raft on the way and forgot about the cause on the journey.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Or the purpose, right? Why you were on the raft in the first place, and you're like, screw it. You guys seem cool. I'm sticking with this.
Yeah. You go into the Frobisher and you realize you're in the Hudson Bay.
Yeah. Nice Canadian reference there.
And when I've seen, I can kind of relate to that in a completely different dimension. When I saw a psychologist about sort of my health anxiety, I remember, although I was feeling a hell of a lot better than I was at the beginning of the sessions, there was almost an addictive aspect to it of unloading your problems with this person who was willing to sit there and listen. And there was almost a pleasantness about the therapy in and of itself, as opposed to, and almost like finding the cure, although obviously that was why I was there. It wasn't so overwhelming that I would be willing to pay for more, but because the primary reason why I was there was sort of, and the problem has been solved. But I can see the alluring aspect to something like that, and the process of therapy and the attention you get from others, and the voice I suppose you're afforded when you speak in a group like AA.
Yeah, you're given a voice and you're given a platform like you were, Jen, when you arrived, and suddenly you're Hollywood, you're famous, everyone wants to meet you, and that's a really nice feeling. So it's kind of like the objective along the way gets muddled and distorted, and it doesn't become about the goal of, okay, this group or this program has helped me become a better, more healthy person. It's the objective is now I cannot leave this. I need to stick and cling to this because I've left everything else in my old life behind.
Yeah, you almost you put your roots down too deep and forgot about the goal in the first place.
And I think that works quite well in North America, because something I've observed is people live so many lives out here. You know, you have someone who's like, okay, for like a few years I was a cop, and then I was a pet store owner, and then I was this or that, and then I started this business, and then...
Have you heard of the business?
Yeah, well, yeah, have you heard of the business? Here you go. So yeah, it's like everyone, you know, I think it's quite common to meet people who've lived so many different lives in North America, and I think that's why the cult mentality has really taken hold here.
Yeah, it's almost an identity to struggle and to hustle. Like, hustle culture is really a deep part of this. Yeah, Andre and I have had a lot of discussions on this, how, like, you know, in North America, particularly in the US, everyone's hustling, everyone's got a side hustle on, or like, oh, Wednesday night I'm with this group or that group, and yeah, that very much lends itself to the success of cult-like behaviors.
Yeah, I almost saw it as, you know, there's almost a need to be busy and hustling one way or another. Ideally, many streams in parallel, right? Because that's the best. The busier you are, the better you are, and all that. And it's kind of, it doesn't afford you clear headspace where you can actually just look at things, just quiet, just space where there's nothing to do. I think people are almost afraid of that because they're afraid of what they'll find inside, where you just have silence and there's nothing to do. I think that's quite a scary idea to a lot of people in the modern world. Did you just solve the mystery why people talk to me in the park?
We've gone like completely full circle here. There's an Ouroboros there. Completely. Ouroboros.
Yeah, perhaps that is why they see someone who is not hustling. I'm not a hustler. Unless you talk about climbing hills. on my bike, but I'm not a hustler. And perhaps they see someone sitting in the park actually enjoying themselves, and it gives them pause too. And it's only in those moments that they get those needs that we have innately fulfilled.
Yeah, quite possibly.
Yeah.
Or they like my bike.
Yeah, or they like your bike, Jen. Maybe they just
Tell me about
attracted
this bike,
to the material
because
goods
the second
you
time
own.
you've mentioned it now, is it like one of these chopper bikes from the 70s? I want to know.
You know, it's a pretty unassuming bike, but it has
innocuous bike.
It is.
Well, it's clearly not, because you mentioned it.
It is my pride and joy. It is my son. It is my son. No,
I'm joining the bike cult.
Yeah, I've done all this research just to learn how I can be the leader.
And if you pay $1,300, Andre, you too can join the bike cult.
You too can finance my next ride.
Yeah.
So it's a typical bike. It's a Trek bike. It's the Toyota of bikes. You know, reliable,
Yeah.
dependent.
Reliable?
Yeah, find parts for it all over the world.
Yep.
But it
Good longevity.
Yeah. It's I love my bike because it's what got me into urban planning in the first place. Because I started to bike around and notice the incohesion and the infrastructural challenges that sprawling North American cities face, and our dependency on cars, and what that means for people of all ages, and even just the attitudes that were presented against me for cycling. Like, it's almost like it's a status symbol. It's not almost like a status symbol. It is a status symbol. If you don't drive, you are not a full-fledged adult. You don't have as much legitimacy. You haven't made it yet. You're not as free. You don't have, you don't have choice.
Social capital, I'd say.
It is 100% social capital, which I think is, I mean, with the pandemic happening, and at least in Alberta, there being a complete and utter bike shortage now. Like, if you told me this last year, that there'd be a bike shortage in Alberta a year from now, I would have laughed in your face. You know, because suddenly people had nowhere to go within their cars, and they realized that their prisms of mobility have shrunk immensely, and they had to actually experience the neighborhoods that they live in, and actually experience how hard it is to live within these sprawling neighborhoods that don't have walkable areas, and the only way to actually accommodate that is by cycling.
Yep. Yeah.
And so for years, people, even my own family members, would call me crazy for biking everywhere, even though it's actually in I'd say half.
I think it's great.
Thank you. Half the circumstances, it's faster and it's better for me.
Oh, yeah.
I think, you know, the environmental gains.
Pioneering.
Yeah, definitely. Because in Europe, you know, there's a huge cycling culture. You know, in London, you just see bikes everywhere. I mean, Andre and I lived in Manchester, and, you know, every other person seemed to be on a bike there. Even where I'm from, Milton Keynes, which you know well, you know, has a huge biking culture with our Redway systems.
Yeah.
In Calgary, it's amazing. You just do not see it. When you see a cyclist, you think, oh, that's a bit dangerous, or like, is that person going to be okay?
Yeah.
Riding down the highway, and yeah, I feel like there's a lot of social exclusion for cyclists because, as you say, they don't carry the same social capital in a North American city as your average driver.
Yeah, it's colloquially thought as the poor man's last choice and the rich man's plaything and the child's toy.
Wow.
That's a really good way of putting it. Yeah.
In Europe, you're certainly seeing the inversion of that, in the sense that the cycling is the way to get around London. And it genuinely is quicker than a car, especially when you're talking about central London zones 1 and 2. But it's probably more widely adopted in places like Amsterdam, when it is the mainstream way to get around. And it's almost like there is definitely the beginnings, if not almost the first stage, of a very real move away from cars and seeing them as almost antiquated. That actually bikes, electric bikes, hybrid bikes, which aid you with your pedaling with a bit of battery boost, are the way to go. And they are, and actually, you know, scooters are over here, Leah. We've got scooters, you know, the ones that the bird scooters from LA. And
they've come over to London now.
Yeah, well, people are buying them online.
Oh, really? Okay.
So it's not so much that there's a hiring scheme, because they're actually illegal for both the pavement and the road. You're not supposed to be using them, and technically they could fine you, but it doesn't stop people. There's loads of
So
them.
people are just riding them all over town now? Yeah.
All over town, pavement, road, you name it.
That's called tactical urbanism.
Yeah, that's really interesting though, because we rode some, didn't we, Jen? A group of us hired some of the Lime bikes.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Lime scooters.
R.I.P. Lime bikes.
Have they gone?
Oh yeah, at least in Calgary they were here
Lime
once.
bikes.
Yes,
yeah.
the bikes.
Yeah.
Yes, but that's a whole other.
Oh, we still got them here.
Oh, my heart weeps for Calgary.
Yeah.
I'm very happy for you, Andre.
You'd love London's bike sharing scheme. It's so accessible. I remember.
Well, it started with Boris bikes.
Yeah,
didn't
the
it?
Boris bikes.
I heard about that.
Yeah, the Boris bike. I remember coming out of my flat in London, putting some money into the sharing scheme meter, and then just taking a bike. There was literally one port right outside my house, and there was one port right in front of my workplace.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty common thing for Londoners. One thing I do wish there was more, in terms of urban planning in North America, was just more democratized bike sharing schemes and things like that.
You know, interestingly enough, and surprisingly, Calgary is one of the frontier towns to do such a thing. Yeah, Calgary had the dockless bike share of Lime bikes for about a year. They were the first in the entire country to have dockless bike share in most of the city. Of course, it's like Lime, where, the scooters, I should say. It's like the scooters where there are zones in which you can bike through.
Yeah.
But generally, it's exactly the same. Like, we were the first city in the whole country to do that. But there are dock bike shares in Canada anyway. A lot in North America. Many more than you'd assume. But one of the best I think I've experienced is in Montreal with their, I don't know how to pronounce it. I think it's BC if it's French. BICI, BC.
Yeah.
And it's everywhere. You dock your bike next to the cafes, and you leave from wherever your apartment is. It's completely citywide, and it's extremely accessible, and they have one of the best transportation systems in Canada because they have transportation choice. They have the ability to get around in whatever way works best for them. They're not stranded, and as such, they also have some of the best social cohesion outcomes in the country as well. Yeah. Because they're not necessarily getting from A to B in a motorized, living room.
Unit. Yeah. So you're more likely to, I think, coming back to sort of the effects on people and urban planning, there's a lot of trust in that, isn't there? When you're sharing scooters and bikes and exchanging them and seeing people, there's a lot more trust, and there's so many positive effects that come from that, one of which is air quality, So I'd be interested to look at sort of the air quality differences in a place like Montreal compared to, say, Calgary. Yeah,
I do know that it was proven that when the world essentially shut down on like March 13th or something like that, the air quality in Calgary just improved immensely. Yeah. And even just like experientially, like with my own experience, like I noticed it to be so much more fresh. Yes. It was crisper. It wasn't as almost heavy. I don't know how else to explain that.
Yeah, I think heavy's my parents definitely noticed that in Milton Keynes and in Leicester, where my dad lives. I don't know if you had a similar experience in London, Andre, because the air quality there is not great, generally speaking, is it?
No, it's bloody awful.
Terrible.
But what I really noticed it, Leo, visually, and it was striking. Because I came out of one of the stations, I think it was Park Royal, the place we used to go to the cinema.
Yeah, Park Royal, yeah.
So it's kind of on a hill there, and you've got a direct line of sight down to central London, so all of the skyscrapers in the city of London. And it's about, in a straight line, about 6 miles. And typically you always see a haze. And because I was so used to the haze, when I walked there, when it was, the traffic was at its lowest volumes, sort of in late March, early April, it was just shocking. It was like I was looking at it through a crystal. It was insane. and it's almost like I just got used to seeing that haze, and that was just the way it was. The way I saw it, but the horizon was just cleared, and these buildings were just crisp. You could see the edges, you could see the glass, and it was like someone had put some high definition glasses on me, and it was actually quite incredible.
Yeah,
it's
amazing,
and that is definitely one of the reasons why I have decided planning as a career, because I do know, apart from the social incohesion of the morphology of our cities and like the way that we've built our communities, all in all, we are facing a climate emergency, and the way that we can stop it is by redesigning our cities. One way, anyway. There are a multitude of ways, but it's by controlling development.
It's one important facet.
Controlling development, controlling land use. It's the way that we will, I believe, save ourselves.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Arguably the one great cause for millennials.
Yeah, and Gen Zs as well.
Yeah,
Gen Zs as well.
Those Zoomers.
Well, guys, I think we can wrap up the discussion there. I think we've really come full circle. It's been an excellent podcast, Jen. Thank you so much for joining this edition of Brobears Talk. Really heard some fascinating, unnerving, and interesting insights on cult behaviour and how it intertwines with urban planning in North America and the world. So thank you very much for joining.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a pleasure.
Yeah, Jen, it was absolutely enthralling. I could listen to those cult stories. I'm sure there'll be many more to come. We'll probably have you on again as a repeat guest. I'll absolutely love it.
I feel like we almost need a part 2 to burrow deeper into some of these other anecdotes.
Sure, I'd love to.
Awesome. All right, Jen, well, thank you very much. Thank you, Brobear.
Thank you, Brobear, and thank you, Jen.
And thank you for everyone listening. Over and out.
Over and out. Kapow.
Pow!